Good evening. It is time for the NFL Week 15 edition of the Iman Report. It is Sunday, December 20th, and we are one day away from the winter solstice, and now it is time to recap NFL Week 15. Of course, we start off with the Sunday night game as the Cleveland Browns beat the New York Giants 20-6. This was a big win for the Browns as they get win number 10. The Browns now at 10-4, first 10-win season since 2007. And tonight, just Colt McCoy was bad tonight. 19 for 31, 222 passing yards. He wasn't terrible, but he was not great either. And then it looks like Riley Dixon had to come in the game. Never mind. But Baker Mayfield, another excellent night. Not quite the game he had last week, but he was good enough, getting 297 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Nick Chubb had a quiet night, but Baker continuing to do the job. And now Cleveland, with a win next week, can clinch a playoff berth. The first time it'll be Cleveland will be in the playoffs since 2007 with a win next week. As for New York, they are not out of it, but they are still a game behind Washington. The Giants' final 2 games are against Baltimore and Dallas. So I think New York's going to need to win and get some help at this point. And most importantly, they are going to need to get Daniel Jones back next week. It will be a very long night against this Ravens defense. It might even be a long night with Daniel Jones. But Daniel Jones gives them the better chance of winning at this point. Colt McCoy fell back to earth tonight. Honestly, Daniel Jones is the better quarterback. On to Vegas and the Chargers beating the Raiders 30-27. LA beat 2-0 since getting dominated by the Patriots. This is a big win going into the offseason for the Chargers, with a team that's trending up with a quarterback in Justin Herbert. Is Anthony Lynn safe? The final 2 games will determine. They play Buffalo next week. That is a winnable game before finishing off against Kansas City. And by then, Kansas City will likely be resting their starters. But, if the Chargers can finish 6-10, 7-9, all of a sudden, Anthony Lynn might end up being safe for another year. Crazy to think. As for the Raiders, yeah, their defense is bad. Mike Mayock and John Gruden are going to have to go into the offseason addressing the defense in the 2021 draft and in free agency. This will be year 4 of John Gruden and that atrocious 10-year contract. Gruden in year 1, 5-11. Now it's looking like he's on the verge of going back-to-back seasons at 7-9. 7-9 is only going to get you so much rope. And on top of that, now you got to go out and find a new defensive coordinator next year. The pressure's on Gruden and Mayock this year to start getting the Raiders back towards the playoffs in 2021. I don't think he's in any danger of being fired just yet. Mark Davis is still a big fan of John Gruden, But you can only get so much grace before Mark Davis can question that hire. 2021 is going to be a crucial year for Derek Carr. It is very likely the final 2 games will be Marcus Mariota at quarterback for the Raiders, with Derek Carr and that groin injury. But after next season, they can cut Derek Carr with very little cap penalty. So 2021 is going to be a very critical year for Jon Gruden, Derek Carr, and Mike Mayock going forward. This Raiders team needs to get back towards being a playoff team in 2021. This loss, they're not mathematically eliminated just yet, but for all intents and purposes, the Raiders have been eliminated from playoff contention. Buffalo makes a statement at Mile High, crushing the Denver Broncos 48-19. Yes, it is time to put Josh Allen in the conversation for MVP. He might be an also ran to a guy we'll talk about next who's likely going to get the MVP. But Josh Allen is balling at the right time. Allen doesn't have to be Superman, but Josh Allen has been great. Stefon Diggs is really starting to become the security blanket for Josh Allen. It is time. I dub Buffalo a playoff contender. Buffalo might at least get to the AFC Championship game this year. This is the best Buffalo Bills team I've seen since the 90s. Since the days of Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Marv Levy. Happy days are here again in Buffalo. And Cole Beasley becoming his own. This is a very talented Bills team. Denver got blown out. But no shame in being blown out to a good Bills team who did not fall for the trap game in Denver. As for Denver, you stick it out for another year. Denver could have a couple wins coming up. You know, if Denver could get to 7-9, I think Denver's close. I feel like Denver is one of those teams that's on the verge. I do. They get games against the Chargers, could be winnable, and a Raiders team that is reeling. There is a path to 7-9 for the Denver Broncos. I didn't think this was possible, but with the bad luck the Broncos have had, 7-9 is not too terribly bad. It gives you hope on Drew Lock. The next 2 games are huge for Drew Lock to have good games. Or Denver could be in the quarterback market in 2021. Green Bay takes care of business against the Carolina Panthers. Green Bay wins the North, of course. Green Bay keeps a hold of that number 1 seed. Green Bay can clinch the number 1 seed with a win next week against the Tennessee Titans. Should Green Bay win, it will give them a golden opportunity to rest starters in Week 17. So you could see Tim Boyle starting against Chicago. So this is a huge game coming up for the Packers. A win next week will secure them the 1 seed, win or loss in Week 17, and it gives Green Bay the golden opportunity to rest starters. Panthers, I think they're a year away. They held tough against Green Bay. In year 2, Matt Rhule is going to find a way to turn some of these losses into wins. So don't be afraid. Better days are coming for the Panthers. But this will be a good draft to start building more offensive weapons around Teddy Bridgewater. For the first time since 2008, the Patriots are eliminated from playoff contention. Miami takes care of business against New England. It wasn't pretty, but Tua gets the job done. Salvin Ahmed rushes for 122 yards. Yes, the Dolphins found a run game today. Matt Breida, 86 yards rushing. Miami still in it at 9-5. And at the very least, they'll get a 10-win season, but that game against Buffalo is going to be huge for Miami. That is looking like a win and they're in game for Miami. Week 17 against their rivals, the Buffalo Bills. That could end up being the NBC game in a few weeks. New England, Cam's gotten worse and worse and worse as the year has gone on. I think the final 2 weeks of the year, you go to Jarrett Stidham. Not because he's a good quarterback or anything, but you got to see if Jarrett Stidham has any opportunity to be a backup in New England come 2021. I expect Bill Belichick to retool this team in 2021. They're either going to draft a quarterback or they're going to go big and trade for Matthew Stafford. It's time for the Patriots to stop nickel and diming their players, start spending money on talent if they want to get back to contending, or New England's going to be doomed to mediocrity for the next few years. But it is starting to feel like an end of an era in New England at this point. And now the Patriots have to look at the draft and see where they end up finishing, whether or not they'll be drafting a quarterback or if they go to the chase to pursue Matthew Stafford in 2021. Cam Newton's not the solution. He's regressed. You got to see what you've got in Jarrett Stidham in your final 2 games. Of course, the Patriots could look to play spoiler in Foxborough against the red-hot Buffalo Bills. In Baltimore, the Ravens take care of business against the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars, 40-14. Gardner Minshew had a good game, sacked 5 times. Sadly, Gardner Minshew is Jacksonville's best option at this point. Lamar Jackson got right today. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Mark Andrews with a touchdown. Marquise Brown was happy today. It was all Baltimore all the time. And the other good news for Jacksonville is they are now in the driver's seat to get Trevor Lawrence in 2 weeks in the 2021 NFL Draft. So all I want for Christmas is Trevor Lawrence, Trevor Lawrence. That's what they're singing in Jacksonville tonight. Christmas kind of came early for Jacksonville. We'll talk about the Jets game a little bit later, but Jacksonville now in the position to draft 1 Trevor Lawrence. Indianapolis takes care of business against the Texans. And in Texan style, the Texans lose the game on a turnover. And, of course, Phillip Rivers had a great game today. Indianapolis holding strong to that 5 seed at 10-4. Indianapolis is in the playoffs next week with a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it was the Zach Pascal show today. 2 touchdowns for Pascal. And for Houston, they're 2 weeks away from beginning the hiring process of Eric Bieniemy and John Dorsey. Better days are coming for the Texans. It's just not this year. Mercifully, the season's over in 2 weeks for the Texans. As for the Colts, Frank Reich is 2 games away from getting back into the dance. Tennessee takes care of business against the Lions, 46-25. Ryan Tannehill with a near-perfect game. Detroit had no answers for Derrick Henry today. Henry rushing for 147 yards. Corey Davis with a touchdown. A.J. Brown with a touchdown. The Titans now 10-4. The Titans also are a team that clinches a playoff berth with a win over the Packers next week. Not an easy task there. Stafford was eventually pulled for Chase Daniel. And I think this is honestly, it's time to call it a year for Matthew Stafford. Let Matthew Stafford heal for the rest of the year. Detroit has nothing to play for. See what you got in Chase Daniel. Maybe see if Chase Daniel could be the bridge quarterback going into 2021, especially if the Lions do end up trading Matthew Stafford this offseason. And please do. For the love of God, Detroit, please trade Matthew Stafford. Stafford deserves to be elsewhere playing for a contender in 21, not in Detroit. Detroit needs culture change, and that part of that culture change is trading Matthew Stafford to a playoff contender next year. Dallas knocks San Francisco out of the playoffs today, 41-33. All of a sudden, Dallas is getting in the race. Don't look now, they're 5-9. They are a game out of the playoff race. With the Washington loss today, New York and Dallas are just a game back in the NFC East. Dalton wasn't great, but he was good. But the Dallas defense won this game on turnovers. As for San Francisco, Nick Mullins, it's time for Nick Mullins to ride the pine. Even if he still has that elbow injury next week, don't even have him active. At this point, go with C.J. Beathard and then have Josh Johnson back up next week. There's no shut down Mostert for the year. Shut down Kittle. Shut down Jimmy G. It's time for the Niners just to focus on 2021 at this point. Get that high draft pick, draft a quarterback, renegotiate Jimmy G's contract, and go at it in 2021. This season's done. No reason to bring any players back that are healthy. Put them on ice. Save them for 2021 at this point. And move on from Mullins and Beathard. And mercifully, the nightmare season's two games away from being done for the 49ers at this point. In Washington, Seattle beats the football team 20-15. Seattle's in the dance at 10-4. They clinch a playoff berth today. And not just that, they get a game up on the LA Rams with them playing the Rams next week, which is going to be a huge game coming up for Seattle. Seattle can clinch the division next week with a win over the LA Rams. Russell Wilson being more of a game manager, and that's being effective. Haskins, it was not fun. 38 for 55, 4 sacks, 2 interceptions. Hopefully for Washington, they can get back Alex Smith next week, as Alex Smith is the better quarterback going forward. Haskins is pretty much a bust in Washington. Or at least get Antonio Gibson back. The football team, they don't need a lot of offense, but they need some offense. Better than what they got today. Good news is Washington is still in first place at 6-8. And the remaining 2 games for the football team are Carolina and Philadelphia. So there's a good chance the football team will finish 8-8, and that would be good enough to get in the playoffs. The schedule still favors the football team to make the playoffs. It's Carolina and Philadelphia does give Washington the easiest path to the playoffs, the easiest path to win the NFC East title. Chicago beats Minnesota. Minnesota, for all intents and purposes, are eliminated from the playoffs today. Chicago 7-7, 33-27. David Montgomery. See what happens when you run the football, Matt Nagy? Good things happen. And, maybe Matt Nagy might have bought himself a little more rope. Trubisky, good enough. Trubisky, when he's allowed to use his legs, is good. Trubisky had a pick. That was it. Trubisky doesn't have to be a world beater, but he's a game manager. That's all you ask for. Chicago all of a sudden is back in the hunt at 7-7. And Chicago gets Jacksonville next week. If the Cardinals do lose one of their... It sets them up, though, too. If the Cardinals do, say, slip next week against San Francisco or loses to Los Angeles the final week, the door is open for Chicago to get in the playoffs at this point. Don't count out the Bears just yet. Minnesota, they gave it their best, but the season's pretty much done for Minnesota. Dalvin Cook carried this team as much as he could. And we'll see if Minnesota, what Kirk Cousins' future is in Minnesota next year, and see how much more tearing down Rick Spielman does this offseason for the Vikings. Tampa Bay survives a scare from Atlanta. Atlanta had this game 24-0 at one point before Tampa Bay came roaring back because, unfortunately, the Atlanta defense is ass. Atlanta now 4-10, securing themselves a high draft pick at this point. And it's looking more and more likely that Raheem Morris will not get the full-time head coaching job when it's all said and done. Atlanta needs to tear it down to the bolts, to be honest. I think they need to draft a quarterback next year. Matt Ryan's not the long-term answer. But for Tampa Bay, they survive a scare, but Tampa Bay is looking like a team that's going to be more one and done in the playoffs. They're not a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion. Tampa Bay has a lot of flaws. And they get Detroit and Atlanta to finish the season. But I don't see them more than a wild card team that goes one and done at this point. In Arizona, the Cardinals get a big win over the Eagles 33-26. Both Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts were good in this game. This was a big win for Arizona as they maintained that one-game lead over Chicago going into the final 2 weeks. They will get games against San Francisco, which I think that's a win. Then they get... The big game's going to be LA. That could be a win and you're in game for Arizona on week 17 against the LA Rams. Jalen Hurts has a bright future. He got roughed those 6 sacks today for Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts might be a mirror image of Kyler Murray. Philadelphia looks like a much better team under Jalen Hurts. And let's see what Jalen Hurts can provide for the final 2 weeks if he can hold down this starting job for 2021. Trading Carson Wentz is not going to be easy. Wentz's contract is atrocious. Philadelphia will have to retain salary in order to trade Carson Wentz somewhere. So good luck trying to trade that awful contract. Arizona, they've done their job 2 weeks in a row, holding on to that 7 seed, and now it's on to next week. In the upset of the day, the New York Jets no longer winless. Jets 1-13 now. The LA Rams lose to the New York Jets 23-20. And Jared Goff reverting to a bum yet again. Jared Goff is what will hold the Rams back in the playoffs. Luckily, the Rams have a win over the Bucs, or they would have fallen to the 6th seed today. But the Rams still hold strong to the 5 seed. Their final 2 games are against Arizona and Seattle. Seattle and Arizona. I think they'll end up 10-6. They will likely probably fall to the 6th seed when it's all said and done. Darnold might stay in New York now. Maybe not so fast on getting rid of Sam Darnold. After that win, does New York want Justin Fields? Ohio State quarterbacks don't tend to pan out well in the NFL. Or does New York get a little smart now and possibly trade down with the number 2 pick? Don't be shocked if we see the Jets trade down now that they're down to the number 2, now that they're no longer getting Trevor. Question is, will Adam Gase be fired after a win? That's another question. But Jared Goff is the reason why I think the Rams will not be able to will not be a big player in the playoffs. And this was a very frustrating loss for Aaron Donald today. We'll see how they respond in Seattle next week in a huge game against the Seattle Seahawks. Last but not least, the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Saints in what would be a potential Super Bowl preview. Drew Brees, he's back, but he was not great. And you can only slow down Patrick Mahomes. You can only wish to stop him. Mahomes is Mahomes. What can I say? 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And Kansas City was actually able to run the ball effectively on the Saints today. And the Saints now tied with Seattle for that 2 seed. All of a sudden, the room for margin of error is 0 for the Saints. They can't afford any more losses at this point. And Taysom Hill was pretty much limited today with Jameis Winston hurt. Yes, the Saints are going to win the South. The but is, okay, luckily they get the Vikings and the Panthers for the final 2 games. So falling to the 3 seed, well, maybe or maybe not. If they lose one of these 2 games and Seattle goes 2-0, they fall to the 3. Right now, this is what the Saints need to avoid falling to the 3 seed at this point come playoff time. Kansas City, a win next week, and all of a sudden the Chiefs will be resting starters in Week 17. Now it's on to Week 16. Fun football. Which teams will get teams like Kansas City, teams like Green Bay get the wins they need in order to rest starters for Week 17. Who will be resting starters for Week 17? We get to the most exciting part, the exciting 2 weeks of football coming up. A lot of divisional games, a lot of teams can be playing spoilers. As we approach NFL Week 16, good night, everybody. I'll be back to do preview NFL Week 16 on Wednesday. Good night.